Hello artists, arters, and art appreciators. I am Arter of Lore and I decided to make another ball-jointed doll. I had a few designs in mind, but I finally landed on doing my very first fan art doll of Milky Way by artist, animator, and writer Lauren Faust, or Firefly on Twitter. Firefly on DeviantArt also. And shout out to YouTuber Izzy's, whose first video of Lost and Cancelled Dolls discusses Milky Way and the Galaxy Girls, which reminded me of the topic. The dolls they discussed are the rag dolls that Lauren Faust designed, which were sold through FA or Schwartz, I believe about 10 years ago now. So, Izzy has mentioned in their video, Faust actually did a redesign of the Galaxy Girls with another designer named Joanne Davidovich, I believe, and it's a lot softer and rounder and closer to a shape that I already wanted to sculpt, so it made me want to adapt the character design to the doll that I had already kind of planned out in my mind, which was doing simpler joints than I've done before, and then not doing joints at the feet, just having like little stub feet, which would make it easier to put on shoes. So looking at Faust art was like also a huge blast of the past for me. If you didn't know, in the early 2010s when I was a teen, I was really into My Little Pony. I actually found the 1980s cartoons on YouTube, and then found out that it had been rebooted by Lauren Faust, who had also worked on the Powerpuff Girls, which was one of my favorite cartoons when I was a kid, and Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends. Not only was I drawing a truly absurd amount of My Little Pony fan art at the time, but I would draw Lauren Faust's DeviantArt page where she posted like sketches, like this Supergirl fan art where I was trying to imitate her style. And I think you can see the influence on a lot of my art from around 2012, especially since I was drawing so much My Little Pony, but also even on the Rainbow Draft doll, which is one of the last dolls I made on this channel. I mean, I can't look it up without seeing My Little Pony in its design, so I think it's safe to say that Lauren Faust was a pretty lasting influence. So, this is just an exciting doll, that's all I have to say. So back to what I'm actually doing in this video. I decided to do something pretty different from this doll than my last and first ball-jointed doll. This is only my second one. On my pumpkin girl, I sculpted all the pieces completely separately and made ball joints out of clay. So they were just basically a handful of like loose pieces. I purchased these wooden balls with the intent of sculpting the doll all as one piece, and then cutting it apart and gluing the balls in the like joint sockets that I can make. I saw some people sculpting this way on YouTube, and I thought it might be easier to keep the proportions even if I sculpted the whole doll at once. I'll be 100% honest and say this was kind of a waste of time and resources and didn't make anything easier in the end, so I don't necessarily recommend it. But I also didn't have a Dremel tool when I got into this project. Cutting up the wooden balls was like really hard and sort of dangerous, and I did kind of stab myself pretty bad early on, like before I started filming. So I'll say only use the wooden balls if you have a safe way to drill into them, and it's probably fine to just sculpt the pieces separately based on these two dolls I've had, so small sample size. I think now that I do have a Dremel, it'll be easier to use the wooden balls, but then also would be better to make all the pieces separately. So I made the decision what to change for Milky Way's face early on, like in my first original sketch basically. I knew it would be practical for her eyes to be so big as in like the design by Faust. My issue with my Chanterelle doll was actually that her face was really flat because the eyes were too big. The face just ends up having to be like kind of too wide for how deep it can be. And I wanted her to have like a more defined nose in the cartoon, obviously. Make the lips like subtly defined but with some shape. And then I also gave her ears, which is, I don't know if might be the most controversial move. I like characters with big ears, and she also has really big earrings, so I figured that like I could partially cover up her ears with the earrings, and then I didn't have to have the earrings just like floating in space. It makes her head potentially look kind of wide and sort of like the TV show Hey Arnold, but I think it doesn't look too bad in the end, especially with the earrings over it and her when she has hair and everything. It definitely matches like my aesthetic for my other dolls, given that I have a Giraffe and Chanterelle, and they all have big ears. So this is where I tell you to like and subscribe the video. If you haven't already, subscribe the video. Like and subscribe. You know what to do. And like maybe please comment. I have stickers on Redbubble, like a shop with like stickers and t-shirts and I don't know, just you can put designs on whatever you want. You can have a mug with a snake or a triceratops or an orange that has legs. Or you can just comment and you can just watch, and that would be great. So thank you for the support, especially the support on some of my recent videos. I've really appreciated it. I did a lot of premature sanding in this project, so I would definitely say wait until the last second to sand, otherwise you'll have to redo your hard work, because as I was like taking these pieces apart, I just like realized that I would have to like do a lot of resculpting. The like sort of some of them came off pretty cleanly. Also, like, don't do what I'm doing in this video. All of this is like kind of dangerous. Not the safest thing. Could have really used a Dremel tool. Was really overusing those X-Acto knives. I mean, I'm trying my best to be safe with that. I don't think I caught myself, like, more than, like, once or twice. But just be safe when using sharp knives, because I tried my best, but I wasn't always the safest. But cutting up the doll made it take a really long time to finish her. I had to widen her hips and her, like, chest part to make everything fit. Her feet weren't cut off, so at least the feet, like, are just stubs, so that made everything a little bit easier. My previous ball jointed doll was actually double jointed, so her elbows and knees had like little beams instead of just a circle, which gave her a fuller range of motion. So I wanted to try a simpler doll, and Milky Way will have less of a range of motion, but I think it's okay to have less like a more limited range, and it'll help with the aesthetics of the doll, so I don't have to worry as much about like the beans tend to be sort of, I find them a little, like, obtrusive to the aesthetic sometimes. I guess, like, maybe people who are, like, really into, you know, have, like, really good sculpts with ball-jointed dolls, it's not as obtrusive, but since I'm pretty new to it, I like that the single, like, smaller joint doesn't look quite as obvious. I will say that I don't think making her double-jointed would have taken significantly more time. I probably could have done, like, the two little beans, and it would have taken just about the same amount of time. I will also note that her hips, even in the end, I had to like cut down sort of part of the hips because they bump up against each other a little bit too much. So that's kind of a thing to watch out for, is definitely make sure your hips are wide enough. After the gluing, sculpting, sanding, filling in holes, sanding again, gluing again, and gessoing, I could finally paint the doll. Painted her in just like acrylics. Her colors are a bit more saturated than the original design, but I think it's safe to call that like artistic liberty or whatever. Her blushing is also a little bit harsh in the end, just a little bit more red than I probably should have gone. I'm not the best with acrylic paint. I'm still kind of learning, and it does throw me off, you know, how dark acrylic paint can turn. So I think that's kind of why. But I think it looks okay. The blending went better than I thought it would, considering I had to like blend in acrylics, and that's not always the easiest thing to do. Especially with trying to avoid streaks, which are really easy to get. So I mixed the paint with like water to water it down, and I think I did a pretty good job at not getting everything too streaky. I love the little white in the middle of her mouth to give her that like toothy smile kind of thing, and I think her mouth turned out really good as sort of a 3D representation of the art. And then I think the eyes also turned out pretty good. I didn't put the like black all the way around, but I put it part of the way around, and I think it looks good that way. Even her like 3 little eyelashes didn't take as many tries as I thought that they would, and they look fairly even, I think, even after the fact. I know that they're like not 100%, you know, nothing's gonna be 100%, but I think that your mind can like fill in the gaps. Like, human faces aren't 100% even anyways. Okay. I was really happy with the stars. Since the redesign has like blobby sort of rounded stars, I think that was a lot easier to paint than if they had been the sharp stars in the original. I don't think I make all of the stars quite as round as on the new design. I try to go for sort of like a just sanded down star look on most of the stars. She also got fabric inside all of her sockets, and then I covered her in matte varnish mixed with water. It was about 50-50 water and matte varnish. I covered that with a couple coats also. So most of the doll's design is based on the newer version of Milky Way, posted on Twitter by Lauren Faust. But I took inspiration for the shoes, the roller skates, from a lot of earlier designs, because the earlier design was more detailed and the shoes were like a lot bigger. The base of the shoe was just this like fabric painted white over top of these like clay soles, essentially. I did try to make these little tubes through them to put the axles of the shoes through, and that changes a few times. So you'll see me change that up later also. I also work on a lot of this stuff simultaneously. You can't really tell because at the beginning I was just working on the clay body. But once it comes to like the shoes and the clothes and everything, I'm like working on all these different pieces at once. So you might see like things in the background that look a little weird. At random times if I couldn't cut away from it. Here are the wheels of the shoes. And they're just little circles made out of polymer clay, that's all. When I'm trying on the shoes here, that's actually the first time I had put her together when she was painted. So this is how she looks all painted and together and everything, and I put her little shoes on. I think they actually look better when they're blown out by the camera because you can't see all the textural imperfections, but as they have more decoration to them, luckily they look less bad over time. I didn't feel like going and getting different yarn, so I just used yellow yarn I already had. It was actually cotton yarn though, which isn't ideal for making doll hair and retains like its like ropiness even when it's brushed out. That's alright though, because like her hair needs to be very long, and acrylic yarn hair doesn't work very long, like very well as long hair from what I understand. The only other option would be getting like proper doll hair, but I didn't feel like it. I can't spend that much money right now anyways, so I just used what I already had. I made her like a little wig cap out of the yarn and a piece of fabric, and then I eventually hot glued that to the removable piece of the back of her head because that was already pretty ugly, and I figured if I need to remove it, then it can just like stay ugly. Like if it takes a little bit of paint off, the hot glue, like it's probably fine, because like it'll be covered up. So eventually I might change the hair, but for now it looks alright. I kind of, you know, styled it a little bit more later on as well. One of the very early Milky Ways has little ribbons on her roller skates, and I thought that was really cute, so I put these little bow ribbons on her skates. I actually had to use a bigger blue ribbon and then cut that up into little pieces, and I just glued it around with like hot glue and things like that. I think I used epoxy for various things in this project, but I just used hot glue for things like this that seemed like they would probably be fine with like a lighter touch essentially. Sometimes I also use like just a touch of Elmer's glue when I'm working with like fabrics, because you don't need anything too fancy. I painted the stars on the wheels and on the little stars and the star streaks on the sides of the shoes, which made them look a lot better, I think overall. I managed to get those stars like really nice and have that sort of bubbliness, which I think it matched the newer style, but the wheels themselves are more in the style of the older doll, and the shoes themselves look like the older doll, just with more like rounded stars essentially. So you'll see there's those tubes that were inserted into the soles get changed up in a minute here. So that's basically because I did put all of the wheels on these little, the end of a Q-tip that was like cut up into little pieces as the axle, and it just didn't look very good because they were just sticking out too far from the shoe. That was my mistake because I just made the wheels a little bit too thick for them to be like on the side of the shoe, which wasn't quite right anyways. It was supposed to be like underneath the sole, but the sole ended up looking more like it was the dark blue base. So I just filled in those holes with some clay. And then I actually just used paper as sort of the thing that holds the axles in place. And I guess the undercarriage of the shoe is there. And so that's just paper for now. I did end up kind of gluing them in place because they were just kind of too wonky and it made them hard to post the doll, them being like so rolly and like loose. So sometimes you have to make sacrifices for like practical purposes. I mean, I'm fine with them like not rolling really at all. Although someday I might like fix the axles just so they're a little bit better. I could probably easily take the wheels off and fix them if I really want to. So, sewing hell was the reason that this doll took so long. In my previous dolls, I hand sewed their outfits, but since it took me so long to sculpt and paint Milky, Christmas came and went, and my mom actually gave me a working sewing machine and a Dremel. Also, my birthday came and went, so that's why I got like a sewing machine and a Dremel. It's really great. So, I have all these new tools. So that meant that I had to learn how to use a sewing machine, which like I sort of know how to use, but I don't really know how to use on tiny doll clothes or like use efficiently. So I made about 5 skirts and 4 shirts before the final design, and I had barely any fabric left. The final design isn't perfect, but like I literally don't have any fabric, more fabric to use in the design. So I guess I can't complain because at least it looks fine. The skirt did end up being a little too short, and the sleeves a little too long and a little bit restrictive, but that's okay. In the end, I made it through. Because this process of making the clothes took so long, the YouTuber Dollightful actually made a video where she goes through making a shirt for a doll that's wearing roller skates, which would have been useful to watch because I would have painted the whole thing with glue, just so everything held together much better. I think I did glue some of the, like, hems, but if I had thought about it, I really should have just glued painted a light layer of glue over the whole thing to really stiffen up all of the clothes. I did use some advice from her older videos when writing out the instructions, though, so there was that. So, yeah. I get a lot of help from a lot of tutorial videos. I don't mention them all because, I mean, I've seen, like, so many doll videos, but, you know, shout out to Dollightful for having, like, the best doll tutorials. Like, her old stuff's really good. So, yeah. After finishing the clothes, which involved gluing down some hems and then doing some sewing on other things, and at one point I make her like a tiny pair of underwear that's actually all glued together because it's not really supposed to show, obviously, but I was like, I think she has to have underwear. I wanted to give her tiny shorts, but it was too complicated. Underwear was easier, and I tied them together so that they're kind of easier to get off in case I need to get them off. And slowly, by hand, cranked the wheel on the sewing machine so it would go really slowly. Yes, the sewing machine is also very old. It was my grandmother's previously, and my mother, like, fixed it up and everything so it works, which was great. Again, cool that I have, like, a sewing machine now. I learned so much about using it. I even, like, replaced the normal foot with the zipper foot because it's, like, smaller, and I found it a little bit easier to see the tiny, like doll clothes sized things. It was just so hard before. I might get a clear one in the future, because I've seen people use that. That's also a lot easier to use than using a normal foot, but using the zipper foot was pretty helpful. So the final fit test came and went, and then after that, the only thing to do is painting the Polymer Clay earrings, which I just made, I don't know, a little earlier on, and then hot gluing on those earrings. Actually, I ended up giving them sort of a gold texture, like a sort of interesting, like, textured look. I'm not sure how I feel about it still, but I don't know, it's interesting at least. And then painting all the little stars on her skirt and her shirt, which was super fun. I mean, I guess not fun, but it was, like, satisfying to fill all the stars out because I had to make so many of them and, you know, try to make them all even and stuff like that. I actually had, like, a good time doing that. And because it was just, like, the final steps, it was so satisfying. Anyways, that's all, folks, I guess. Now we can look at Milky Way in her full glory. This doll was a real adventure. I learned a lot of things, like my willingness to work on a project for 3 months. Winter was a rough one, but we made it through. We finished the doll. I didn't know if it would happen. I put her in some poses based off of the original art of Lauren Faust, of course. You can see her, like, little boots that are all painted, and her hair I styled as best as I could, as neat as I could. I gave her this little ribbon that I had lying around, and a little jacket that I made. Actually made that earlier on, and it kind of sucks, but it's also kind of fun that she has another little jacket. And then of course I had to put her with all my other dolls because I have to put all my dolls together so you can see them side by side. The pumpkin girl is so much taller than her that I just put her on the floor. And yeah, I hope you like this video. You know, please like if you haven't already. Feel free to subscribe. And yeah, just have a good day. Shout out to, you know, favorite animator, character designer Lauren Faust. Big inspiration for me. You know, maybe someday Milky Way can have her own TV show. You know, I'll be on board for it. Anyways, have a good day, everyone.